And welcome everyone to a live broadcast of Rock M Radio. This is a brand new episode of Dive Cuts. It's season 7. We are live Tuesday, December 12th. It's just after 8 p.m. I am your host, Sam Snelling. To your right, if you're watching this on YouTube, and if you're watching us live, then you are, is Matthew J. Harris. Matt, how are you?
I'm doing well, Sam. I'm glad that we're channeling our own Bill O'Reilly tonight and just going live and giving people an unfiltered view of the creative process and maybe talking basketball at the same time. So
there's always basketball to talk about. How much we actually talk about basketball, we're usually pretty good about it. I'll say that much. So let's go ahead and let's just start with like the biggest news of the moment. I think a lot of people were pretty excited today. There is a 5-star prospect from Columbia, Missouri, who chose the Tigers. That would be 2025 point guard Aaron Rowe. He's grown up in Columbia, went to Father Tolton, was at Link Academy last year, and Branson is back at Father Tolton. And I believe he just got cleared to play the rest of the season after his transfer,
January
which
10,
is also good news.
Yep.
So hooray, the 2025 recruiting class starts with a local kid, a 5-star prospect, a point guard. Could you have asked for a better way to start your 2025 recruiting class?
No, I really don't. Just, I don't know what else you would have wanted from them. Maybe for him to be a top 10 prospect. I don't know. Like even down to like play style, it's a really,
Still possible.
Really great.
Still possible.
It's early. And now they have time. They have, we can get to talk about that a little bit, but they've got time now to dedicate resources to other prospects that are on the board. Granted, it's December and we're in the middle of the season, so I don't know how much of that's going to happen outside of maybe trying to get guys on campus. But no, from a narrative perspective, from a timing perspective, from a play style perspective, I don't know what else today could have left anybody really wanting as an outcome here. I don't think, you and I always try and, take a nuanced view of this, and we try to avoid, hyperbole, but I really don't know what else you could have asked for out of this situation than what transpired today. And I think, when those moments happen, you should acknowledge it. And so today it really, really was, I think it's obviously great for Aaron. It's great for him to, say, whether it was on a live stream or say the local reporters, I came out of that visit and I didn't think I needed to waste any other coach's time. For him to feel that certain, for him to feel that resolute is awesome. I think you and I have, from different perspectives, been around the recruiting process, and it wears on guys, but guys hang in and they go through it, hoping to get to the best outcome. So for him to have that clarity and that sort of sense of, comfort with the decision, a year ahead of schedule is awesome for him. It's awesome for his family. So I think we should start there by saying really, really happy for him that, he feels that good and that committed. And then for the program, I think we talked about it the first day Dennis was hired here. This was a guy you go see the first week, and they did. And you get in the gym and you go see him and you start building that relationship. And, I think you start anticipating, when are the blue bloods going to start moving in? When are we going to start really having to hope that our relationship has some mileage on it and has some durability? And for them as a staff to put
basically like the Caleb Love approach. Like,
yeah,
you anticipate at some point that was going to happen.
And it never happened here. It never happened.
Well, and to also, part of that is Aaron shutting this down this quickly. This is really, like we talk about Caleb Love. Like Love was a guy who didn't really start to blow up until the spring after his junior year, and here it is, in the middle of the winter of Rowe's junior year, and he's he's saying, I'm done. I like where this fit is, and so
Yeah.
that opportunity to kind of get more eyes in the spring, where the blue bloods kind of tend to recruit, steers them away. And not to say that Missouri couldn't have fended them off.
No,
but I do think that is, it is significant, and it does sort of help Dennis Gates and his staff set themselves up for the rest of what they want to do in this class.
Yeah. The way I sort of look at it is, he could have gone into spring and, waited to see, what KU, I think, is probably the biggest name offer he had. Texas was in there as well. That's no slight to Tennessee. Tennessee's been really, really good under Rick Barnes, but I don't think you historically associate, Tennessee with a blue blood. They've been very, very good in the last decade or so under Rick, and they have a, history, that's it's pretty prevalent in the 70s and early 80s too. But, Kansas had not really ramped up here. You hadn't seen Aaron, invited tonight at Fog. You hadn't seen like unofficials there. You hadn't seen Bill start trying to really work his way in there. That didn't happen. And I think that was always sort of the thought process there was, okay, when is Kansas, the regional blue blood, going to start trying to make a move? And as I wrote today, there are connections all over that roster. There were 3 Mocan guys that were kind of the core of that national title team. There's a Columbia kid running the point guard spot for them right now. So, and they've, Bill can sell development up and down the ladder too. He's been, whatever people want to say about dubious professional ethics, he's really, really good at developing guys. And to not even like get to the point where that was a pitch I think he had to worry about is impressive. It's just a really, really, I think sort of big win for the staff that they carried this much momentum, that they carried it and got it done this quickly. And to your point, this spring now, the change in the recruiting calendar makes that a little easier to bear. Now they won't have to decide, do I need to be at a grassroots event versus handling portal? But now, going into spring, our centerpiece is here. It's done. It's locked in. We can now go through, April and May and really focus on, what we're going to do next year. And then we can begin to filter and get the next 2 to 3 big pieces to go around Aaron. And, for them, it's great to say, look at what we have lined up for you. We've got Anthony Robinson, we've got T.O. Barrett, and now we've got, Aaron Rowe lined up. If you're looking to come in and play with really good table setters, what we have here. So I think it makes their pitch a little easier to make.
And so we have a few kind of questions coming in. So
Okay.
I'm going to, drop one on, because I think this is kind of where we should kind of go next. And like, what kind of player is Aaron Rowe? I think, you've watched way more film. If anybody has followed Dive Cuts, long enough, know that, Matt Harris is a guy who will, in his spare time, watch, 4 to 5 grassroots games just on a whim. I don't quite have that level of patience, but I have seen enough of Aaron to at least kind of start this off. And for me, the best thing that you're getting is a guy who plays with great pace, but also great speed. And that combination is not something that you always find in a young player. And he's been that way since I first saw him when he was a freshman. Yeah. Very, very top end speed, can get to his spots very, very easily. But he never looks like he's in a hurry, and never looks like he's, flustered or sped up. Like, he plays with that pace. And that's, I think, when you look at the system that Dennis Gates wants to run, a little bit more up and down, he's really, as much of an ideal fit. And the fact that he is a Columbia kid and here's a coach that has this system, it's just I think this is a great fit.
Part of the reason the clips I sent out yesterday look kind of same-ish is they're all early clock, which Dennis empowers his guys early in the clock. And there's either no screening action or just a flat, ball screen, a butt screen, and then just, hey, can you go make a play? And this guy can go make a play in the middle gap. The first 1 to 1.5 steps, ramp up speed is fantastic. Never looks out of control, though. Always able to get into the paint. Always on balance. Footwork is fantastic. A little more righty dominant in his finishes, but he can go either way. Just fantastic in early clock at understanding how to play with the right amount of pace, but gets there quickly. At least when I've watched him a lot with Mocan, he was part of a 3-guard lineup. So you saw him attacking in early clock, and then they would use him kind of in some late clock action to go hunt for them. But in that in-between time, when Dennis wants them running offense, he's a guy that, you can have kind of move the ball where it needs to go, but he can still make the right reads and pick and rolls. He can still make the right reads. If he's got to play off the ball and find cutters, he's very, very good at, I think, staying, decisive without being careless. I think he can clean up some reads, sometimes on the backside of plays. But realistically, when you watch him at full speed and you watch him in ball screens, he's doing 80% of what you want him to do. And, to have that kind of guy, who can, within the flow of your offense, just take a ball screen and, create easily out of it and make right decisions is fantastic. As a scorer, I think he gives this team something a little bit different. Dennis has talked about wanting to shoot a lot of threes. What I love about Rowe is he's just fantastic with dribble combinations in that mid space. Off one dribble, use the pull up, and he can get to the elbows. He can get to his spots. He's really, really great about carving out space, but not needing to sort of like ball stop to do it. So he can play in those kind of in-between spaces out of ball screens in the half court. He's fantastic in early clock, makes good decisions. And the thing about it is he's only going to get better as a finisher as he gets stronger, as he adds weight and as he adds that strength. I think you're going to see him, really become a guy who can punish people downhill out of those ball screens. So fantastic fit, does what they want to do, plays at the kind of pace they want to play at. And you just, the one thing is if you can find full games of him, he's playing up against guys that are sometimes 15 months older than him and does not look rattled. In the first 15 minutes of a game I watched this summer against Dylan Harper, he's going right at him. The number 2 recruit in the 24 class, not backing down, not shrinking in that moment. He's staying level-headed, staying composed, and going toe-to-toe with him. I think that's fantastic. It's just the mentality and the right mix of skills. He's an absolutely perfect fit for the way this team wants to play.
Yeah, he's listed as kind of like 6 foot, 6'1".
Yeah.
Maybe that's stretching it. I think currently listed about 160, 165, maybe.
Yeah.
Which is definitely on the more slender side. But I just think like when you look at everything that like Dennis Gates wants to sort of accomplish with his offense, what type of playmaker at point guard do you want to sort of plug into that spot? And I don't know that you could have created a player any better than like Rowe is for this team, this roster, and sort of like how he's going to kind of fit once he hits on campus. Now it is going to be a couple years.
Yeah.
So I think I had heard, maybe some, rumors of a reclassification. I don't think that is a real possibility at this point.
Nah.
I mean, like nothing would ever surprise me when it comes to, decisions to reclassify. But I feel like there hasn't been a lot of legitimacy to those rumors.
Yeah.
I think there's just a really good opportunity for Rowe to kind of, become a real fixture in the 2025 class, become, a solid 5-star kid. He's currently ranked 20th in the composite, 20th in 247 sports individual rankings, the number 4 point guard. He is a 5-star in the composite, a 4-star in the rankings. So that is one thing to kind of take into account. We're going to refer to him as a 5-star because it sounds better.
And we use the composite.
And we really we tend to focus on the composite, and the composite is also like a lot of the the lower end 5-star kids that are a year out, like they'll get that 5th star usually, when they refresh the rankings in the spring.
Yeah. So great fit. I think thing that I saw today was somebody asking about him on the defensive end. Is there a worry there? I think if there's one thing you want to worry about, it's, does that frame hold up? Teams will target him sometimes in pick and rolls. They'll target him sometimes to get switches into ISOs against bigger guards.
Mm-hmm.
I think, as he gets stronger and his frame fills out, that lessens. It's a valid critique right now, but he can't help physical maturation at this point.
Right.
But when you watch him play and he's got to execute coverages and he's got to execute scheme, he's locked in, he's focused, and he does the job. I just think, there's a reason you could say, what about the defensive end? Something that's out of his control. That's why there's 2 years until he shows up on campus, and his body will fill out in that period. And I imagine those concerns will ease as that takes place.
And if you want to target him early, he'll be backlined by Jordan Butler and Trent Burns and Peyton Marshall, who are all kind of tall.
Yeah.
So
there's insurance back there.
Well, like we said, this is a great way to kind of kick off the 2025 class, which this is going to actually move in where we did want to talk about, which is sort of what the board looks like with the rest of the 2025 class. Some of this is open to some fluctuation. I would anticipate because of them adding both Burns and Marshall in this last class, the likelihood that they fall in love with a big is probably lessened. Maybe not completely wiped away, but I would definitely say lessened. And they're always going to be looking for wings and skilled forwards, guys that kind of play that hybrid role, that 3-4 spot. So who are those guys, Matt?
The two guys they've had on campus this fall, Jasper Johnson, a high 4-star, 5-star combo guard originally out of Kentucky, and then had transferred to Link Academy. That's where he's playing right now as part of an absolutely stacked backcourt. He visited in November. They'd been working all fall to really get him on campus. I think they're really excited about, getting that visit done. And in October, they had Efiosa Oliogu, a 6'5" wing out of Canada, who's running at DME Academy in Florida on campus. The scuttle there was that Oliogu may be looking at a reclass into 24. So I've been keeping kind of an eye on Johnson as the other guy there. But he's a combo, a little bigger than Aaron Rowe, 6'4", 170, 180. If you like Shawnee's kind of play style, that's what he's kind of like. The question is, would you take two ball handlers in this class? I think they're particularly worried about, are they going to be too young at some point at the guard spot? I think in the spring, you're probably going to see him target somebody in the portal. But Johnson's a 5-star guy. If you can have, as many great skilled kind of ball handlers, that's a good problem. I think the one thing that's going to be worth tracking over the winter is, can they get inroads with a guy like Jalen Harrelson, who's from my neck of the woods in northeast of Indianapolis in a burb called Fishers. He is now at LaLue Academy in north central Indiana, runs with Indiana Heat. They tracked him over the summer. Trey McKinney was supposed to take an OV. He's out of the Detroit area, out of Flint, actually. But that was canceled because he had to go to a USA basketball minicamp. That has not been rescheduled. Some other names I would keep an eye on. Terrion Burgess, a really, really kind of like fluid, hyper-skilled 4-man out of Benton, Arkansas. Played with Missouri signee Honor Boateng for Arkansas Hawks. But I can imagine the State Razorbacks will be targeting him as well. Chuck Love, who took an unofficial last spring. He's a wing out of Nebraska. He's also gone to LaLue Academy. His dad was a former assistant coach with the Nebraska Cornhuskers, so that's sort of the connection there. But he really, really impressed over the summer at the Elite 100 camp put on by Nike. And then a local kid, Nick Randall, who has dipped a little bit in the last couple of updated rankings. I think he's below 100th in the composite right now. But he's a 6'7" kind of hybrid 3-4 wing out of V-Side in St. Louis. So those are kind of the 5, 6, 7 names I'd look at right now. Johnson and Oliogu have taken officials. Love and Randall have both been on campus for unofficials, and there's some out-of-state guys that I would look at. But that's kind of where things were coming out of fall. I think it'll be interesting to see if they get anybody else on campus for an unofficial or an official visit this winter. But for right now, it looks like they're kind of at the same time pivoting to the 26th class. But those are some names in 25 I would put a pin in.
26.
Yeah.
Sheesh.
Sheesh is right. 3 years away.
What year commitment. Is
it? We're at that point now. We're at that point. But yeah, that's what the board kind of looks like at this point.
Yeah, I don't, it's one of those things where, like Rowe was always very clear to me anyways, that he was, so high on the board. You wanted to make sure that you could lock him in. Now that he's locked in, I feel like you could go a lot of different directions and you still finish with a great recruiting class.
There's still 3 recruiting windows between now and when he gets here. I think that's the thing people have to keep in mind is there will be the spring period where they'll probably be portal heavy. Then you got to sign Rowe next fall. And then before Rowe even gets there, there'll be another spring period where you can dip back into the portal. They've already run 20 plus bodies through this roster. Like I'm sure you'll consider a scholarship math piece here, but like I looked at the projections, and if everybody stays, if there are no defections, everyone loves it in Columbia. No one wants to leave. No one is upset. Everyone is, singing Kumbaya.
And everyone is told that they should stick around. Like,
correct.
That's another part of it. Yeah.
Everyone's copacetic with the situation. There's 3 spots in 25. A ball handler was one of them. A wing was one of them. And kind of that flex 4 spot was probably going to be a need. That changes based off what they do in the portal this year, and then I think the bigger deal is what happens next year after some guys' sophomore years, when I think guys are really going to have a better sense for if they're going to be able to, make a go of it here, and will there be some defections then? Like, everyone's happy right now. I think, everyone agrees that it looks like the freshmen are going to be back next year, even off 10 games. But after that, do you start to see some defections? We don't know.
Yeah.
But I think it's always a good idea to keep an eye on wings with this staff. I really think skilled wings is probably a better area to look at. So if you see 25 wings, that's probably a position I'd put a pin in at this point, especially given that they've, Honor Batang is going to want to get out of here quickly. Marcus Allen's going to hope to develop quickly and get out of here, within a couple of years. So wing would be where I would go. But at this point, I think it's just best to put a pin in names and then just see how the needs for this roster evolve over the next 18 months or so.
Yeah, I think we're at a place where, like, I definitely want to see who's going to stick around after this year.
Yeah.
Before you start to, and I will probably do a scholarship math post at some point in the near future, just to kind of, discuss this, because once you sort of have an addition, then it does change the math. But it is difficult to project that far out. Like, we've just been so used to these, like, kind of like late cycle additions. And Dennis Gates and his staff have been, very quick to add, quite a few names early. And I think that kind of gets to, a question that I did want to address from Kyle here, which is how big of a deal is it that they wrapped up the 2024 class early so they could very, kind of quickly turn the focus on 2025. And I would, like, my first comment to that would, like, I don't think you ever stop recruiting.
No.
Like any particular class. Like, if there's a possibility, so even like right now, I don't think they're done recruiting and 2024 recruits. If the right player, the right situation kind of pops up, they will continue to add to that class. I do think it's probably unlikely that
Yeah.
they add any more, freshmen.
I would say that's
To,
exceedingly low.
yeah, but we'll see kind of like what happens with the portal, and then you can just kind of go from there. But I think there is an advantage to sort of having your core group, knowing that you've got that kind of set. They're signed. Let's start making sure that we put our primary focus and energy into 2025. And let's get this Rowe kid locked down. I think that's kind of what they did.
Yeah. I think I wrote it a year ago on signing day where it was like, there's time is the most important commodity you have in any endeavor. And, this staff, gave itself options. I think of the initial group that they had visit here, only Marcus Allen and T.O. Barrett committed. There were 6 or 7 guys that visited early, like Jordan McCullum was a guy they were happy to get on campus last year. He wound up kind of plateauing and he's at Murray State. They had guys that they got on campus that it just didn't pan out. And so, but they had a board developed to where they could then, they had scouted, they had, formed some early relationships and they could shift and evolve. I think, getting the 24 class in the barn early, was just helpful because they didn't have to try and the market, outside the top 100 is pretty thin right now. I don't know if you would have gone out and you would have found guys irrespective of what you could have done in the 25 class. In 24, it would have been really, really hard because some of those guys that maybe that would have waited until spring to see if their stock would go up. Well, those spots might vanish because the portal's there. So like a Jordan McCullum who might have waited until spring to see, hey, will a high major come back around with the spot? That's not happening. Those high majors are going to go to the portal now. So Jordan McCullum, a borderline top 150 kid, is going to go play at Murray State. That's fantastic for Murray State. So for Missouri, it getting the class done early, I don't know if I think it helps, obviously, them work ahead for 25, but I think just for 24's sake, it's important because there's not a lot of backup options. There are no more plan Bs and plan Cs where a kid's going to, wait it out. They know a school's going to go take the proven production of the portal. So they're going to go commit to a mid-major. So I think for 24, it was big because it meant they weren't in a spot where they were having to, go from a top 80 kid, telling them, sorry, I'm going to go somewhere else to, all right, there's no one between 100 and 200 in the composite we can go get. We've got to, really go take a developmental guy, or we maybe have to reach in the portal for somebody that we don't want. So I think, it helped obviously in 25 up to an extent they could work ahead, but I think you have to look at 24 as getting done early meant that they didn't really have to compromise as, going through the winter and into spring. So that's kind of answering the question, kind of not, but I think that's how I look at 24 and what the early work there did for them.
Yeah. So I guess to kind of, wrap this all up, it is great news that you're basically getting this started this early, that you're getting your 2025 class started with this kid this early. We kind of mentioned how good of a fit he is. You're sewing up a top 20, top 25 level player in your backyard, before his big off season, because the big off season is always spring to the end of summer for for kids kind of going into their senior year, and that's kind of where things stand. Anything else that you want to hit on recruiting wise? You want to turn our attention to the team that's actually playing basketball for Missouri right now?
No, I'll just say again, I'm happy for Aaron, happy for his family that, again, just that, they felt comfortable enough making a decision right now. It's I think it's a good sign for them that their process was pretty well defined, that they had a clear conception of what they wanted and what a successful outcome looked like. And, just, for them to feel like this is it, it's really great for them. And I'm happy for them. And, you and I, say a lot of the time, even if a kid doesn't pick Mizzou, we just root for them to find the outcome and then success that works for them. Just hearing the way Aaron talked about his process today and sort of how he came to the decision, it sounded like there was a lot of certainty and a lot of comfort, and I think a lot of satisfaction in how it went. And so that's just what you root for these guys. It's stressful enough, the scrutiny that they face, even from us, even from me putting out film stuff is really, really high. So for them to get to a point where they're really happy, it's heartening to see. So I just want to put that out there and say it's great, and we should be happy for him just to reach the outcome that worked best for him.
Yeah, and I think there was another comment earlier in the chat. I was kind of trying to find it, but the comments are loading a little slowly. About that. It's also possible that that Rowe and his family, the recruiting process is can be brutal, especially for a kid.
You've watched it. You've seen it from.
Yeah, like Aaron. When you're that level of a kid, you're getting a lot of contact, and it can wear you out. So being able to kind of shut it off early, may benefit him. And so kudos to Dennis Gates and that staff for going in and making sure that the relationship was terrific. And then you basically say, like, well, let's just stay home. Let's get this wrapped up. I guess turning to lesser news.
Now everyone's going to leave the chat. We're talking.
Yeah, we're actually doing really well. We have 40 or 45 people and watching right now. So thank you everybody for tuning in. Let's talk about the border war. So we don't really need to spend a whole lot of time here. I said a lot in study hall and how I felt about the game. I do think that Missouri is playing better basketball. I thought they really missed an opportunity. I thought they played well enough early, and if it wasn't for a couple, that the run is going to happen.
Yeah.
Like your hope is that instead of a 20-2 run, which it ended up being, it's more like a 12-2 run. It's going to happen in that building. Like, there's just no way to get around Kansas not making a run.
It happened to UConn in that building, a top 5 team.
Right.
It happened to UConn.
Yeah. And UConn, outside of that few minutes at Fog Allen, they look like they're, destined to, win another championship. Like, they just looked incredible. So it's going to happen. What happens outside of that? Can you lessen the impact? And I thought there was just a lot of opportunities where, little things that Missouri did to just sort of not quite.
Yeah.
The one that stood out to me is even like a really nice lob pass to Aiden Shaw, who
can't convert it.
Just hit him in his hands. He just didn't catch it. And it's just like so many of little plays like that where you have an opportunity to make a play, to sort of take some wind out of the KU sails, and they just couldn't quite do it. Like that, once KU got ahead, Mizzou did enough to hang around, but they could never get over that hump. There was, I think at one point they were down 8 and missed, back-to-back possessions.
Yeah.
I think one was the Trent Pierce miss on a 3, and then he had another turnover on the next play, and it's just like, that's just you can't do that and win in Fog Allen. And Missouri has now had 15 opportunities to win there and come up empty in all 50. I don't know if 15 is the number. It was 1999 was the last time.
Yeah.
Britney Spears's "Hit Me Baby One More Time" was the #1 song in the country the last time that Missouri won in Lawrence.
Watkins will, do kind of the autopsy on this tomorrow in his, usually pedantic way. I cut video for that this afternoon. I'll borrow a phrase that, you hear European soccer announcers talk all the time. Do you have a clinical edge about how you play? When there are opportunities, is build up play good? Do you do everything right? Is the movement right? But when you get in front of goal, do you finish? And I felt like there were a lot of times where Missouri just didn't have that. We talk about the 20-2 run. Missouri had a 13-3 stretch midway through the second half, which included a mini 7-0 run by Connor Vanover. They were getting stops, legitimate stops. KU hadn't quite mailed it in yet. They weren't quite just going into protect the lead mode, they were still playing, and Missouri whittled it down. And so I look at that 13-3 stretch as kind of doing what you were talking about, turning a 20-2 run into a 12-2 run.
Mhm.
So you've essentially offset the big chunk of that run. Can you make that push? Missouri, I think Watkins and I looked at it, they had 3 opportunities with rim finishing chances in the first 6 minutes of the second half, missed them. On the succeeding possession, KU comes down and scores. One of them's a 3-point play. That is a 15-point swing. You cannot do that in Allen. And that takes that game from being, 45-40 going into the under 12 to a 15-point lead. You just can't do that. And so everyone's going to look at, oh man, they had that 5-minute slip. They did some work in the middle of the second half to sort of mitigate that, but there were opportunities there to close it. And, as you talked about, there were chances even when they did get it to 8 to get it to 6. And I think I even said something like Missouri has just decided that 8 points is where it's going to stop, really trying to work it. There were opportunities around the rim. We'll have video of it tomorrow that, Aiden Shaw's got 2 missed lobs. There's, 3 transition opportunities they don't cash in. Like, you could go up and down the list here of plays that were within Missouri's control that could have made this a ball game where they apply game pressure and they just didn't have it. We can talk about whether the rotation influenced that to a certain degree, but I thought on balance, Missouri looked better. I think it was a team that looked like that deserved to be on that floor with Kansas. They went through the same kind of run that everybody else did and found the same problem that a lot of people do, which is they just couldn't make the plays that they needed to get a result.
And it is really difficult to win in that building for a lot of different reasons. I mean, and look, we hate giving Kansas any credit whatsoever. At least I do. They
didn't look great, but
Bill Self. I really hate that team, and I'm tired of losing to them. But they're really good, and that's probably a big reason why it pisses me off that we can't ever seem to beat them, because they're just really good and they always win, and it's really just annoying. But what, and again, this is one of the things that I do, and I kind of I put together a lot of the the how to watch posts is going back and looking at the historical aspects and just seeing the number of times that unranked teams walk into Fog and get out of there with the win since Bill Self has been there. It's basically non-existent. And, especially for a non-conference game, it's occasionally happened for conference games, but it really in the last 8 years, 9 years, it just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Which I think is also why for me it was so frustrating, because they did have the opportunities, and it's just and you saw they were doing the things they needed to do to make Kansas play poor enough. Defensively, the way that they were guarding them in the half court, they were frustrating them early. They were really kind of getting to them, and it just didn't quite get it done.
What's infuriating too is you could see about at the under 12, Bill had sort of pieced kind of the Rubik's Cube together as to what Missouri was doing in the half court defensively, and just starts running sets that aren't going to feature Hunter, aren't going to feature McCullough, but KJ Adams is a guy that is probably what, 3rd or 4th in your scouting report, but he's a guy where you don't think about him, and you're in the course of possession, you're trying to deny Hunter. Oh, here's a little drop off at the elbow. I can sink a little bit. Nah, KJ Adams has a push shot from the elbow that he's actually worked really hard to develop. Hits 2 of them.
Yeah.
Oh man, I got to get middle gap, here so I can take away the driving line to dump off to Hunter. KJ's there and he just slips it. There's a layup. We're going to go zone to try and change it up and get him out of sorts. Screen the zone, throw a back screen lob to KJ. That's why Bill Self is a Hall of Famer, because you can nail the scout and he's like, all right, I'll just run these base actions and we'll see how well you know your scouting report. Do you know your personnel? And I love Aiden Shaw, and I thought he made a lot of really, really great defensive plays around the rim. but 3 or 4 of those KJ plays, he's the one who's supposed to be picking them up.
Mhm.
And a little bit of that slip, not an egregious one, but just a little bit hesitant to close that down, and it was over. And 6 of those points came during the big run and helped kind of get them over the hump. So I think that's what's infuriating is you see a staff that, by and large nailed the scout. Guys executed it. But you give one little window to that team, they don't have, and they're not playing great either. But they are so well drilled, they're so clinical, they will absolutely rip you apart. It's infuriating because you have to admire just how clinical Bill is about that stuff. And you did 85% of the work, but that team will absolutely punish you for the 15% that you leave out there.
Well, so let's maybe spin this in a more positive way.
Yeah.
Because I really I had no problem being critical after that game. They missed their opportunities, and
Yeah.
I think the coaching staff, if they're doing their job, and they're pointing that out, guys, we had this game, we could have done this, and instead of being down 12 or 15 points, we're tied, and if you start to put that game pressure on KU, then you hope that that's enough to kind of allow you to get out of there with the win. But one thing that I do think that we really need to give them a lot of credit for is how unfazed they were by the environment. I never felt at any point of the game, even when Kansas was on the big run, that Mizzou was just melting down.
No.
Maybe you can point to a couple of those air balls as being Mizzou melting down, but you have Noah Carter in a corner 3, Nick Honor in a side 3 on a transition. These are shots those guys make, and they didn't make them. And so they came out, they were up 15-6 or something like that. They absolutely looked like they were unfazed by the environment. They stuck with it. They had a bad go of it here and there. Kansas made plays. Mizzou came back, made some plays. And, I think that's one area where you have to really give credit to the staff and sort of how they prepared their team, their roster to kind of go into that environment and to basically look like a completely different team than, what we've seen the last couple of years.
You lose 4 pros off of this roster. You lose Caleb Grill, who you're counting on, to a wrist injury. John Tanji has, not been available. You're having to play 3 freshmen not in substantial minutes. All those guys having to fill some critical time to give guys some breathers. And you look like a team that, probably, should, contend for the middle of a conference. I think the biggest thing that struck me last year was just how overwhelmed that roster looked. For the moment to be in that building, for the energy, Dennis and the staff, I think, also deserve credit because I definitely don't think they did what they did a year ago, which was say, we're going to burn the boats and play the way we play. I think that they saw what happened last year and realized what that produces. And they made some compromises in terms of how they want to play. I think the guys who went through it a year ago saw what this thing looks like live. And, again, I think this freshman class, has had its moments, where you kind of go, they look good one day, they don't look the other day. But I think the one thing that's impressive about all of them is you can tell they're just very even keeled. I didn't look at any of the freshmen. I thought they made freshman plays, but I didn't look at Trent. I didn't look at Jordan, and I didn't look at Ant and say, man, those guys just, you can see the whites of their eyes. I thought they were just guys who, they're young guys and they're going through it. But I thought that they, mostly looked, calm under the pressure of what they were going through. So I agree. I think everyone got there. This team looked like it was 19 points better than it was a year ago. And to do that on the road with the kind of production they lost is, I know you said you don't want to believe in moral victories, but I think you can see kind of the gap close a little bit. And that's, what you want to see before you can beat this team. You've got to find a way just to hang in there. And they did that. So we'll see what happens when, all this talent we're talking about and gushing about gets here and when they can develop it. I think there's a reason why Dennis has right to be confident in the tone he struck afterwards. I think he can see what's coming if he can do what he needs to do. So
Yeah.
On the day, bad, but I think you can see this thing getting to where we want it to be, which is a rivalry with some genuine stakes attached to it, where there's actual, real, stakes involved.
And where Missouri actually beats Kansas. Like, just beat them. Beat those guys. Like, that's what I really like. If Missouri has a team that beats Kansas, then and can beat Kansas on a regular basis, then
You're a
you
top
have
15 program.
Right. You have a national title level team, Final Four level team. Like, that's like, what else do you want? And I think if you're talking about like our hopes for what we think Dennis can achieve, what kind of a talent that he's assembling, the next step is not just being like, oh shucks, like you tried hard and you kept it kind of close. The next step is like we just walked into Lawrence and we beat the Jayhawks. Like, that is the next sort of step. And it's going to be a while before you're going to get the opportunity. Next year is in Columbia. The 2 years after that are both in Kansas City. Hopefully they extend the contract beyond that, because that is all the contract was just the six games. And then you can get another opportunity and 4 or 5 years to go back to Fog.
Bill sounds like he's softening. He sounds like he's softening on that position.
I know I said this. I think I said this last week on the pod. I do think that like Kansas put themselves with Bill Self and his egregious cheating to need Missouri for the first time, and I'll be curious to see. Like, I don't think he also quite realized how popular the game was going to be, and even like if you're Bill Self and Dennis gets one, you still got to think like, we're going to get him the next 5-6 times because we're Kansas, and so maybe that ego allows him to just sort of it becomes like bragging rights where it's just an annual game.
I think the difference is too is Kansas is the Big 12 is stable now, and I think that's been the big thing is the Big 12 has been the aggressor in a lot of conference realignment. The Pac-12 is dead.
Basketball league.
It's the best basketball league in the country. The ACC.
It was the best basketball league in the country, and then they added like Houston.
Hey,
and
Houston's
BYU
good.
Is like a top 15.
BYU's good. Like, so there's stability there. They've added Arizona's coming into this league. They've tried to poach Gonzaga. So I think from Bill's seat, I liked what he told Vahe Gregorian of the Kansas City Star, which was, we're not having to look down the shotgun barrel of like the Mountain West. Yeah. They're in a stable position. I think the other thing is football looks like it's really, really competent under Lance Leipold. I think just the entire institution, the athletic department there, loath as we are to admit it, is in a pretty healthy position. And I think that makes you willing to look across, the state line and say, Missouri's relatively stable. We're relatively stable. We dominate this series 9 times out of 10.
Yeah,
it's something our fans, right? It prints money. That's it. If nothing else, this thing's going to print money in the P&L, after they get there. So I think, Bill's position, has evolved as the institution's kind of stabilized. I think it, when you hear him talk, I know people are, again, loath to, credit him too much, but you hear him talk about the Big 8 and talk about kind of what it was like to play in that, to come up under Eddie Sutton. I think he gets what it means regionally. I think part of him loves that. And, he's been on both sides of rivalries with Mizzou. I think he understands it. And I think over time, he'll always get his digs in, but I think part of him loves being part of this. Mm-hmm. And I think Dennis, as we've seen, is such a student of history here. You've got 2 guys that I think get it, want to keep it going. And again, it freaking prints money, so why not do it? So right. I'm going to be an optimist and break my usual pessimism streak here and say that I think they'll find a way, as the John Hamm meme, that's what the money's for. They'll find a way to make it work. They'll find a way to keep this going.
Yeah. Any final thoughts in KU before we because we do need to wrap up. I was going to try to keep
Yeah.
this under an hour, and we're almost at 50 minutes, and we still haven't talked about Seton Hall.
Show Aiden Shaw a tape of KJ Adams. That's my last point.
That little 10-foot push shot, because that's great, and also the dunks are great, and like KJ Adams is good at the dunks, Aiden. So
he's good at cutting baseline, doing the dunks. You already do that. You just need to add the push shot.
You just add the push shot. So Mizzou does not play basketball until this Sunday. They're scheduled to take on Seton Hall. Currently, the Pirates are 86th in KenPom. They have a 6-4 record. They did beat Monmouth. That was tonight, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Their 4 losses are all to top 100 teams. They lost to Rutgers. It was the lowest KenPom rated team, 73rd. They lost by 7 at home. Lost to Baylor by 18. Baylor's pretty good, though.
Yeah.
Lost to Iowa
by 13
13 on a neutral floor, and lost to USC. USC's been really pretty up and down.
Yeah.
So that was by 8. Meanwhile, they have not beaten a team that is ranked inside of the top 200. They don't really have a lot of middle games there. So St. Peter's, Fairleigh Dickinson, Albany, Wagner, Northeastern, and Monmouth are their 6 wins. Coming to the Sprint Center.
Get excited, KC alums. Get excited. Murder ball's coming.
Yeah. They do play a slightly brutal style of play. They're very physical. They do have good size. They're going to rebound. This is going to be a task. They aren't like a great scoring team. I think they're kind of a little bit like Missouri, where they're just kind of okay on both sides of the floor.
Yeah, I thought they'd be better offensively with a guy like Kadari Richmond and Alamir Dawes. I thought those two would have them a little bit better.
Well, neither of those guys have shot the ball particularly well.
No, I think that's what I'm getting at. Is I thought that those guys were going to be a little bit more reliable for them coming into the year. The front line is sort of a mismatch. Jaden Bediako, mid-major transfer, Elijah Hutchins Everett, Austin P transfer that Missouri called once. Dre Davis was a kid. I saw he's an indie kid, transferred from Louisville up there, kind of a undersized four-ish type of guy. But, I thought it was going to take him a year to settle in. But really, you needed Kadari Richmond and Alamir Dawes to sort of be the guys to drive that, bus for them. And it just has not happened for them. Kadari Richmond is, 2 of 15 from 3. He's been okay, but I don't think, quite to the level that they need to thrive. Alamir Dawes, 103 offensive rating, 31% from 3, 42% inside the arc. It'll be fun for Nick and Alamir to see each other in pregame, 2 former Clemson guys, but just not the real depth that you want to see. They're only about 280th in bench minutes, so they're not deep. They don't have a ton of proven scoring outside of those 2 that we just talked about. They're physical. Shaheen Holloway's teams are going to get into you defensively. It's going to be a meat grinder in terms of what we see in this game, and they also want to make this a slow game. Both teams want to grind you down defensively in the half court, so it'll be interesting to see sort of what transpires here. The hope is that Missouri's got a little bit more juice offensively. Missouri can shoot it a little bit better. They'll have the length, I think, to throw some bodies at the front there, and can you get Sean East creating? Does Nick Honor, trade some drives to nowhere for some spot ups? And can Noah Carter get some traction here and really, give you some efficient offense? I think Missouri I like as far as the possibility to score the ball a little bit better. It'll be a pseudo home game for them. And it's a game that I think low-key Missouri would love to flip on the team sheet. It's not going to be the deal breaker in getting them in the tournament. This is one of those games that the committee's going to look at in quad 2 and go, that's solid. And it'll start, helping them mitigate what happened against Jackson State. So going to be a tough game, but one I think that they need to get if they want to try and start positioning themselves to make a move in SEC play.
Yeah, if you're looking at sort of like the Missouri team sheet, you're still kind of staring at that Jackson State loss. Everything else has gone well for them. Like they need to, like, this is a game that I don't really think that they can afford to lose, and not necessarily because like it's not a bad loss if you lose a neutral site game to Seton Hall, but because you have that Jackson State loss, and because you didn't beat Kansas, and you have Illinois coming up, like you really kind of need this win, for your team sheet. And I know it's always kind of weird when it's still early mid-December and we're talking about the impact to your NCAA tournament resume. But when you lose a quad 4 game, that's going to put you in a bucket with other teams that also have really ugly losses on their resume. And that's one of the things that made, Missouri, such a lock last year. And, a lot of people were thinking they were going to be on the bubble. And, anybody that paid attention, you look at their metrics and that look like a bubble team, but you look at their record, their strength of record, and they won all the games they were supposed to win. This year, they haven't done that. And so just having that one quad 4 changes the dynamics of kind of like what you need to do, and so even like a quad 2 level game, that you're projected to win, you need to win that game.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, the best way, I asked Watkins to check his sheet, and I asked, Rocco Miller, who does a lot of bracketology and scheduling stuff, where Missouri would be without the Jackson State loss. You'd probably see Missouri as like the 4th to 6th team out right now, if they had beaten Jackson State. Like, pretty much where they started the season. We thought, that they would probably, look like an NIT team that can maybe with the right circumstances push their way in. Had they beaten Jackson State, even by a point or two, the net rankings and the KenPom rankings would have looked poor because they would have underperformed by 20 points. But somebody would have looked at their resume and said, a lot of teams have struggled. A lot of teams have been through that this year. We've seen this across the SEC and in some other leagues, but they've done what they've needed to do. Strength of record metrics are really good. Like if you look at just their strength of record and like their performance metrics, they're a team that probably should be in that first 8 to 10 teams out category.
Yeah.
But the quad 4 loss is disqualifying. So they've got to try and, do what they can. The way to think about it too is they're forecasted to beat Seton Hall by 2. If they beat Seton Hall by 5, 6, or 7 points, that starts cleaning up some of the underperformance they've had. So it's not just, can they get a win by a point? Can they win by, they don't need to make it a 15-point blowout, but can they win by 5 or 6 and begin backfilling a little bit? And if you can do that against Seton Hall, and even if you beat Illinois by a point, you've overperformed by 9 points in expected margin. So Can you get 2 possession wins? Could bump you 15 spots in the metrics there, and it's going to help your performance thing. So that's really what's at stake for them in the next 2 weeks is they don't have to look like world beaters. They don't have to win by more than 1 or 2 possessions in either of those games. But those results position them going into SEC play as a team that's right there on the bubble. And that's where you want to be, as you get.
And there's a lot of SEC teams who have not looked great.
There's 9
even
teams.
Some SEC, even some SEC teams who maybe have looked okay, but haven't necessarily had to play anybody with a pulse. So there's still, there's still a lot that we're going to learn about not just Missouri, but the rest of the SEC. And I say the best thing you can do, go beat Seton Hall. Like you said, beat them by at least like 5. You want to beat them by 10? Great. 15?
Even better.
Great. But yeah, you definitely like, the larger the margin, the better it's going to sort of help some of those net numbers, which I think is kind of what people are kind of looking at with some of the ugly parts of Missouri's resume.
You can't
Uh,
last thing I'll say is you can't get in the NCAA tournament non-con, but you can rule yourself out. You can really take yourself out of the mixer, with a brutal non-con. We saw it with Vandy last year. Vandy had a fantastic stretch in SEC play. If you had gone from December 15 on, they were an NCAA tournament team. But non-con can be disqualifying.
So I think that kind of like wraps up what we were going to talk about. There is a lot of bowl stuff going on for the Missouri football team. Matt and I are not going to talk about that. This is Dive Cuts. We talk basketball. We could talk football, but I don't really think either of us are the most knowledgeable. So we're gonna wait. We're gonna wait for Nate Edwards. I think he's still gonna record with Parker this week, and those guys know a lot about football. So they'll be back with a new episode of Before the Box Score. So definitely make sure that you have clicked the like button here. The subscribe button, I think, is right next to it. And do all those things for this channel to help us grow. And then the last thing that I'm going to throw up on the screen here is our collaboration with 573tees.com. If you go to 573tees.com/collections/rock-m, you will find a new T-shirt that Levi has thrown together for the bowl game. As usual, we are splitting the proceeds with 573. He's taking kind of his cut, what it takes to produce a shirt, and we're putting the rest towards name, image, and likeness. Every true Tiger is the organization there that we're supporting. So go buy a t-shirt. It helps us support Missouri's pretty robust name, image, and likeness. I mean, I'm sure Aaron Rowe is getting taken care of. I'm sure Williams Nwaneri is getting taken care of. There's I think Caden Green is the offensive lineman from Kansas City who just is going into the transfer portal and is very likely to get a robust NIL offer from Missouri. Hopefully he takes it. Go support that. And then we will be back next week. We'll talk about Seton Hall. We'll preview Baggin' Rights. And thanks everybody for tuning in. We appreciate your time tonight. You can follow him on Twitter. You still tweet at MattJHarris85. You can follow me if you want. I don't really tweet anymore. Just follow the flagship at Rock-M Nation. Anything that you need to know about Mizzou sports is on and on Twitter comes from Rock-M Nation at Rock-M Nation. And we will be back next week. So thanks everybody for tuning in. Have a great night. Bye.